right, I can see your screen, and we'll hold all the questions till the end.
Sounds good.
Thanks.
All right. Welcome to Building Security Audits with Extended Events. My name is Jason Strait. If I can get the slide to move forward here. Let's, there we go. The slide finally moved forward. My name is Jason Strait. I'm your presenter for today. I've been using the extended events here for a few hours, for a couple of years. First saw it at Past Summit about 3 years ago, and after seeing that, I was completely hooked, and so I've been digging into extended events since then. After this session today, if there's questions that you have about what you've seen, you can feel free to email me. I've got my contact information up on the screen right now. I do blog about extended events and other topics, such as indexing, out on my blog, and then you can also follow me on Twitter and reach out to me in that way as well. The slide deck and all the resources that I'll be talking about today are available on my blog right now. If you go to jasonstrait.com/go/xevents, it will be listed down there as one of the presentations. So without further ado, let's go forward on the slides. Just a quick little summary on PragmaticWorks, the company that I work for and the one that's bringing you the presentation today. PragmaticWorks has been around for a number of years. They do quite a bit, or we do quite a bit with SSIS and DTS and on the BI side, but we do have a really strong group of consultants that do a lot of work with data management and building out databases and performance, and we've got tools and also classes around performance tuning and a number of us going out there helping customers with large data scaling issues. So if you do have questions and are looking for more information on PragmaticWorks and you have issues with performance, like we're going to be talking about some of the things with auditing today here, we are pretty good experts in all that, and we're a little bit personable, just a little bit. And so the topic today is looking at security audits, and the idea is, say it's 12 o'clock. Do you know where your data is? That's a commercial that really pairs on a commercial that I saw when I was a kid, where it's, it's 11 o'clock at night. Do you know where your children are? Well, it's 12 o'clock. Do you know where your data is? Do you know who is accessing your data? People are always trying to get in and use the data because they've got jobs to do, and they don't want to be held back by things like security, and sometimes just outside of the jobs that they do, they've got the desire to just go and look at things. Just because there's a table there, sometimes we want to select from it and take a look at it. Well, as DBAs, we're responsible for this, and even though they have the access to that information, we need to be sure that A, they're accessing it the right way, they're not getting into things that they shouldn't, because you don't want to find out that you and your company name are in the newspaper for potentially sharing Britney Spears sales information. That kind of stuff does kind of shine darkly on the DBA, and even though other people get in there and are doing all of that, it does become the DBA's responsibility to prevent that. It's our job to prevent bad behavior by other people when it comes to the database. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk a little bit around a few things. We're going to talk about security audits, of course. We're going to talk about the security audit components that are available within extended events. Then I'm going to show you how to build a login audit and then build a query audit. And so let's start off with the security audits. Now with the security audits, there's a few reasons why we do have the security audits that are available within, and there's a number of security audits that are available within SQL Server by default. And the reasons that we want to go out there and take a look at things is we have regulations that we need to follow. There are laws and governments in place that want to tell us how we can manage our data. There are corporate policies that say what people can and cannot use. And then also that responsibility as a DBA to prevent people from doing bad things. Curiosity may kill the cat, but it can also kill your career when somebody gets in there and looks at things that they really shouldn't be doing. And the most important is that everyone lies about what they're doing inside your database. Even unicorns. I mean, all they are doing is trying to get out there and do their job. And sometimes they don't have access to things for a reason, and so you need to check up to make sure that they're not trying to get into things that they're not supposed to be touching. When we're talking about security, there's a couple things that we need to look at. We need to look at both the users that are accessing the system and the data that they're accessing. Which queries is a specific user running? What is he or she taking a look at? And then from a user perspective is, when is the person logging in, and how often are they logging in? What machine are they logging in from? Things like if you have a login that's tied to a specific application and it's being supposed to be run on, host 10.10.10.1, and every time it's being run recently, it's always coming in on, .192. You might have some questions about who is actually using that login. And so there's things like that you need to go out there and validate to make sure that people aren't doing. Now, within SQL Server, there are 4 types of included audits that are available. There's common criteria compliance, there's C2 audit tracing, and these both tie back to sets of regulations that provide a certain level of assurance that activities and actions are being tracked within SQL Server. There's SQL Audit, which was released with SQL Server 2008, and then there's just extended events and some of the events that they have there. Now, the main focus on what we're going to be looking at is going to be extended events, but we're going to look a little bit at SQL Audit because SQL Audit is extended events under the covers. SQL Audit is just a cover that goes over extended events, and that's why I've titled this Using Extended Events. And we're going to look at both of those a little bit and see what you can do with those in conjunction with your system. Now, the reason why we're not going to talk about common criteria in C2 is they are a bit difficult to manage. They collect a lot of data. You don't actually have any control on the information that they collect. It collects what it's supposed to collect based upon those audit levels. And some of them actually cause behavior changes in SQL Server. So one example is the way in which permissions are inherited between different security levels does change with these audits. And that kind of level of auditing isn't always useful when you're looking at just doing, say, login auditing, or if you want to find out when someone's, when you want to go through and find out every query that a person is running, or if you just want to find out every time anyone is running a query against a specific table. You don't want to jump the gun and use these because, well, they just bring back too much stuff for narrow requirements. Now, when it comes to SQL Audit allows for 2 levels. You can do things at the server instance level, and then you can do things at the database level. It captures a preset amount of data, and what I mean by that is that there's certain columns that it's always going to collect. You can't reduce the number of columns. It just collects this set of data. You can do both synchronous and asynchronous targets. You can go out to a file, you can go to a security log, you can go to the application log, you can go to all of those. The nice things about the security log and the application log is that you can use other tools then to monitor those event logs and pull in the events that you're tracing or capturing through SQL Audit and then report on those. Now, with SQL Server 2012, SQL Audit is available in both Standard and Enterprise Edition, which is a big change from 2008 because 2008, SQL Audit was just for Enterprise Edition. And so that argument that people used to have that, hey, you should make everything in SQL Audit available within just the basics of extended events, well, you don't need to really have that need anymore because SQL Audit can be used in both Standard and Enterprise Edition. And so if you're not using it today because of that enterprise restriction that was part of 2008 and you're on 2012 right now, really take a look at it, because as I'm going to show, it provides some really good ways to go through and capture information. Now, whoops. Now, what the heck happened there? Let's jump back down to my slide. That was not supposed to happen. Now, when it comes to SQL Audit, there's a couple concerns that people are going to have, and that's that no control on the columns. And so if you're doing something that you just need a little bit of data and you need it right now, SQL Audit can sometimes give you too much. You do have some limited output formats, so maybe you need just some in-flight data. So you want to be able to watch it as it comes through. Maybe you just want to throw it up into memory and parse it from there. Or if you need to add in something else. There are a few ways that you can use events similar to SQL Audit within extended events, and that's going to be what we're going to talk about in the second half, that you can do some of the security audit stuff and watch what Bob's doing while Bob's doing it. But when it comes to SQL Audit, if you need to track permission changes, login creation, backups and restores, and all of that kind of activity, DBCC requests, SQL Audit is really the way to go. And you don't have that addition restriction that's going to get in your way. So, do you know SQL Audit? And when I've talked to people about this, I've asked them, hey, do you use SQL Audit? Do you know how it works? Yada, yada, yada. Most people are no. So let's do a SQL Audit demo. And as I mentioned, with SQL Audit, there are two levels of audit. There is, if we go into security, there's the server level or instance. And then we go into the database, and we're going to get the database level as well. Before you can create either a server level audit or a database level audit, you do need to have an audit location. And that's basically where you're going to put all of your audits. And where's that audit information going to go? So let's see if we've got any out here. We do have one that's out here right now. And I'm just going to delete that out because we want to just have nothing here. And I don't believe I have any audits right now at the database level, and I don't. And so to start this off, there's two ways that we could start this off. We could start off by just right-clicking, build out a new audit. It's going to give us the screen that gives us the options for the name of the file, how many milliseconds it can wait between queuing the items. What do you want to have happen when a SQL Audit log fails? You can, if you want to, shut down a SQL server if it's not able to continue logging. Not a very typical requirement, but could be one on some of your high-end, high-security data that you need to, if you can't log people accessing healthcare information, maybe you can't have anyone querying whatsoever because that information is that important. You do get some option with maximum numbers of files and how it does rollovers. But let's just start with doing the server audit. And I've got a script here that you can use to build these out. That's the thing that I really like about everything that is rooted in extended events is that it's easily scripted out. And so we'll just walk through the script that I have here. Now I could have just skipped dropping everything, but there is server audit tables, server audit specifications, and server audit tables that give you information on the items that are out there. You can easily stop and drop both audits and server specifications. And even though I know that I dropped these, I'm just going to run through it real quick just to get that complete message. and then we'll build out the audit file. This is where we're going to tell it where to go. Whoops. We'll tell it where to go. We'll give it a maximum size. 0 megabytes means that it can be as big as it can grow forever. Maximum rollover size, whether you want to reserve the space. You can pre-reserve the space for the files to make sure that you don't run out of space. The queue delay and what to do on failures. The second part of this is where you're actually building out the audit specification. And I'll go into the wizard that you can use for building these next. But I just want to go through the script on this. That way we just get it built out right away. We're going to be auditing the DBCC group. We're going to turn that audit file location on. We're going to build up the specification, and then we'll turn that specification on. So let's run through and create that. Now that I've got that created, we can go back over here to Audits and Service Specifications. I can wonder why they didn't show up. Let's try it one more time. Audits. So there we go. Not sure why it didn't work. But we've got a file and we've got a DBCC audit. And for this server level, I'm just doing DBCC. You can do quite a few other server level activities, which I'll show you here in just a moment. Before we get to doing that though, let's just run a shrink database. So I'm going to run a shrink database because we know that never should we ever allow our junior DBAs to do this. And maybe they're going to do it in the backside thinking, hey, I'll never get caught. And that's something that people often think when they're working with our databases, hey, I'll never get caught. And that's why we need things like server audits. And so let's just look at the specification here. And what we can see is for the specification, we've identified that file location that I mentioned. And then we've said to use the DBCC group. And the DBCC group just brings back every DBCC command that gets run on the server. And as I mentioned, you can do a lot of other activities. You can manage and track every level of permissions changes. Now, this is kind of important because if you go on vacation and you leave the keys to the castle to somebody else, and say you give them the SA command or the SA login just in case they need to do something while you're on vacation. And while you're gone, they tell you that, hey, I never used it, but you come back and check your audit and you find out that Bob gave himself permission to have sysadmin on the server so that now that you're back from vacation, he can just do the things that he wants to do without having to bother you. Now, of course, you want to be bothered because Bob is just a developer and shouldn't have production access. But you can track all of that stuff. Now, the way in which you see the things that you've tracked is by viewing the audit logs. And within the audit logs, you are going to see all the events that you're tracking and the fact that audit sessions are built and changed. Now, we can go into the audit log for the DBCC command, and we can easily see who did what and what command was written. And so this is a nice way of stuff that's already pre-built using extended events on the backside to do audits for your SQL server. Now, of course, there is the other side of the spoon where you're looking at, or the other side of the mirror where you're looking at the database level. Now, in the database level, we're going to do pretty much the same thing. We'll create our audit log. We could use an existing audit log, but in this case, we're going to use a separate one. And what we're going to do is track within the AdventureWorks database, anytime anyone does a select on sales order header, that's in the public role. Now, we could track this down to a specific person or a specific group of people. That's some of those options that are out there. Let's get that created and go take a look at this so we can see that the select audit log is created. If we go up to AdventureWorks, we have the database specification that's up here, and we can jump into that and you can see that, expand that out. We don't expand it too much. There we go. I don't want the columns to get too big there. We can expand that out and we can see that we're doing a select on an object, tell what the object name is, and then the principal that we're going up against. And we can add in others just as easy by doing a select. So maybe we'll want to do an entire schema. And add that in, and now we're doing the sales schema. And then also, let's see here, maybe we want to do public here as well. And so we can do these kind of things and collect that kind of stuff. And so, yes, we've got one for sales order header. We also got for just for sales. And so let's just play around with this a little bit. And I did make a mistake in setting that second one up, so I'm just going to delete that. Not going to dig into the mistake because, well, what we shouldn't ever do in a demo is type, and I just actually kind of did that. And so let's just take a look at doing a couple queries here. So we're going to look at sales order header. We're going to look at sales order header and do a filter and bring back some purchase orders for Britney Spears. That query is not going to work, but hopefully you get the drift. Now if we go back down, take a look at our audit, view that log, we can see that there's two select statements that went in there just like what we had. And for the first one, we do have who did it in the query. We do, of course, have some other things like the session ID, and let's see here, some other things that might be useful. The server instance, and we've got the event time, things that you can use to find out exactly what's going on. And we can also see that if somebody does do a filtered query, we do get the SQL statement that was part of that. And so we can go in there and find out exactly what people are looking at. And so if Tiffany wants to go in there and take a look at the sales orders for Britney Spears, we can actually see that that's happening, and maybe Tiffany doesn't work with the entertainment industry, and that would be wrong for her to have accessed that information. And that's what the SQL audits can give you. It can give you that assurance that people aren't touching from a corporate policy level the things that they shouldn't be touching. And so if you have those kind of needs, definitely start looking at audit, especially now that you can use it for both standard and enterprise edition. Now there is, though, this need for not quite the full package of SQL audit. Leveraging what extended events allows for, but being maybe a little bit less invasive, and not grabbing all those columns, covering something that's more of a temporary need. So you have a new DBA named Bob, and you want to find out, this junior DBA, I've never met the guy before, he did really great on the interview, but let's just watch what he's doing on the server for the next month. That's a solution, and that's an issue that I've checked in before. Or you want to find out every time Sally is accessing a specific database. Or if you've got a requirement to find out what logins and logouts are happening and the frequency that they're happening on a system. These kind of requirements don't necessarily need all of the columns provided by SQL Audit, but you still need to get to that data, and you can use extended events to accomplish this. So let's take a look at some of the components from extended events, and in building extended event sessions that you can use to do this kind of stuff. And so there are 5 basic components to extended events. There are packages, events, which are the events that are happening. There's actions, which is additional information that can make the information provided by an event more descriptive, but aren't necessarily part of that event. Predicates, which are your filters, and then targets, which is basically where you want to put this data. Now packages, and I didn't explain this, packages are a way that you can bundle up all of these different pieces. Now there is a security audit or SEC audit package that's out there, but you can't actually access anything in that within extended events when you're creating your own sessions. You can only get to those pieces through the SQL Audit wizards. So what we're going to focus here though on is SQL Server. So the SQL Server package has some events that we can use to dig in to see what people are using. We can look at logins, we can look at logouts, we can look at statement starting, RPC starting, module start, SQL batch starting. The reason why I focus on doing the starting is because we want to know when somebody is trying to do something, not when they've done something. Because somebody might write a few queries to look at this different data. Maybe they don't have permission to do that, but it's still your responsibility to know that they tried to do that. Now actions, these are additional information that you can throw on because you're going to throw things in like username, client app name, host name, the database, the SQL text so you can see exactly what they're trying to do. I got username on there twice. That's nice. Server principal name, so you can see exactly what people are trying to do, and you know who's trying to do it and where they're trying to do it from, and that's what you can get from the actions. Now your predicates, and this is where it gets kind of powerful because you can filter things down to a fairly low granularity. If you need to look at one user within one database, you can very easily do that, and it's very it's easy. But you can get granular, and the filters are, they work in a short-circuiting method, so the higher the item is in the list, well, the highest item in the list of your where clause is going to be the first one that's processed, and so if you can make something that cuts off the most data early on, then you're going to be able to improve the performance of your extended event session. Now when it comes to targets, there are about 3 targets that you're basically going to use when you're doing these kind of low-tech, low-necessity types of audits. The file target, so if you just want to collect information to see what your new DPA Bob is doing, you can throw it out there. If you want to just see what Sally is doing in a specific database for today, you don't need to retain the data for very long. You just want to watch because something fishy might be going on. You might throw it into the ring buffer. Or if you can watch this stuff come through, you're going to use the event stream. Now you don't necessarily actively tie the event stream in. You leverage the event stream when you turn on the live viewer, which I'll demonstrate here in a couple minutes. So now that we've gone through those components, I want to show you guys how to build a couple audits that will go through and provide you some information which will help you get into using audits more. And if you're not currently using SQL Audit, maybe help get you up to that level where you want to start using that on a more regular basis with some of the stuff that you're already doing with extended events. So when you're talking about the logins, there's a few scenarios where you're going to want to dig into it. How often is a login being used? When is our logins occurring? Are you getting a mysterious login by an application that's only used during the day that's happening at night? You can dig into that. Maybe you want to find out which applications are using a login or which hosts are logging in the most often. Maybe there is a complaint about an application that appears to be heavily weighted on one of the production app servers, and it's supposed to be evenly distributed. There's a load balancer that's pushing things through, and somebody suspects that one of the hosts is being used more often. Well, you can help with that scenario with a login audit built with extended events. Now, what we're going to use here for building up this login audit is actually one of the templates that comes with SQL Server 2012. With SQL Server 2012, there is a GUI involved or provided with Management Studio, and that has some templates in it, just like Profiler does. And in this connection tracking template, you have logins, you have logouts, and then you have a connectivity ring buffer recorded event. We're not going to deal with that third one, but we are going to look at the first two. Now, when it comes to the targets, there are the three targets that I mentioned. You can do the file target if you need to do some long-term analysis, and if you're collecting login and logout information over, say, a month's period because you want to see every login that's being used. There is the ring buffer, which is just throwing it up into memory if you just want to see what's going on right now, and then the event stream that you can use for some real-time analysis if you need to do that. I'm going to show you how to dig into all three of those. And so let's start that demo. So for the logins, well, let's build the audit first. And to build the audit, you go down into Management, expand out, and you're going to have extended events, and you'll have some sessions that are out there. And so the basic path to get down here is then into Management, extended events, sessions. When you get to sessions, you can right-click, and you'll have access to the new session wizard. The new session wizard will guide you through that template. And so let's bring up that template. And then the first page of the template, now there's an introduction screen, which I did skip, but in here we can do the session, and we'll just call this connections. And we have the option to have the start when the SQL Server starts up. One of the nice things about extended events, when you compare them to profiler traces, is when you're dealing with profiler or SQL trace, if your SQL Server stops and then restarts, you have to rebuild the trace. Not so with extended events. Extended events, the trace is part of, the trace definition has a property that makes it a part of the startup, or not rebuild, but where it retains that trace session. So we're going to make it so it does keep that session. We're going to use one of the templates that's out there. And there are a number of templates. We're going to be using connection tracking, but if you wanted to, or if you needed to, and you're not familiar with extended events, there are some others that are included. You can do batch tracking and sampling. You can do query detail sampling and tracking. And then one of my favorites, and the reason why I became hooked on extended events to begin with, is the query wait stats. And so if you're dealing with wait stat issues, extended events can help you tie wait stat events with actual queries so that you can know exactly what's causing wait stats to occur. Now, when I first started looking at extended events, this was the thing that made me I was like, wow. But we're not talking about that today. There are some extended event sessions that Pragmatic Works does have out there on their free training site that you might want to take a look at if you are interested in that. But let's start with connection tracking. We'll go to the next screen, and it's now going to give us all of the events that we're currently tracking. Now this wizard, because we're using a template, is going to set up for us a number of events. But we could add in other events if we wanted to. We'll do a search here. So the search allows you, that's included within the live viewer, allows you to find events even if you don't know an event exists. So I'm going to check to see if there's any other login type events that are out there. And I'm just going to search through the event names. I could, if I wanted to, though, search event names and descriptions. I could look for event fields. I could search through all of them. Well, let's see if there's any other logging type events out there. And there really isn't. Suppose, though, that there was one that I wanted. We'll just take error log written. If for some reason we wanted error log written, and this has a very limited, I would say, description. It's the name of the event with the underscore removed. So let's try something else that has maybe a larger description. When you are looking for events, all of the events do have a description. Now, as I showed with error log written, it didn't have much of a description, but they all have a description of some level, which is kind of nice because if you're new to extended events, which a number of you are, you may not be familiar with all of the events that you want to dig into. And so that's going to help you figure out what it is that you want to grab onto. It's also going to tell you which events or what event fields come with that event by default. And so no matter what, if you bring in had run, undo, redo, log scan, you automatically get log remaining and total log. And so every event that you're going through is going to have that. And the ones that you do have in, you can take a look at their descriptions by just highlighting them within the list. Now we're not going to add anything to this. Let's pull that search out and just go to the next screen. On the next screen, it's going to add in those what they call here global fields, but which are actually the actions that are available. Now I'll just do a search on these. Do a filter, sort, and it'll just show you that we've got these that are included for all events, and then we've got instance name and session ID that are only included for a couple of the events, or less than all of the events. But you can add in others if you wanted to. If there was a need to add in also database ID, you could do that as well. Let's take that out though, and go to the next screen, and then on the last screen it's going to give you all of your filters. In this case there are no filters, and we'll just leave that as it is because we want to know all logins that are happening, all the connections that are happening on your server right now. Now we could save this out to a file if we wanted to. We're going to skip over that for now because I know that I'm going to be pounding this machine with logins. We can set how many events we want to keep. We can say how large is the max size. And in this case, we're just going to put it out to the ring buffer because we're going to do some just quick analysis of what's going on out there. And now that we've got that, we can just get it finished. And we'll start the event. And we're going to watch it in the live viewer. And that's the two last options it gives you. Start it right away because automatically they don't start. And then if you want to watch it. And so let's get that going. And we've got the timestamp, we've got name that came up here in the live viewer, we've got the timestamp, and we do have 3 others that showed up here, but by default, if you were doing this on your machine right now as you were watching, you would actually only see name and timestamp. And there's a really good reason for that. When you're creating an extended event session, name and timestamp are the only 2 columns that are absolutely in every other session, every other event that's out there. So it's the 2 columns that they know that we can put these 2 columns up, and every session will always provide data for these 2. Now, of course, there's always going to be other fields that you want to take a look at, and so let's first start getting some data to show up in here. And let's see here, load, bring up the load generator, and I'll add a query here, and I'm just going to run this one time, but I'm just going to let it get going there. And so it's running here, and it's logging in, it's running this query, it's logging out, it's logging in, running the query, logging out, and we've got a couple thousand in there now. And we can see that we started getting all of the events. We have about 2,998 executions of this, and we got 5,700 that have shown up here. So it looks like about double, which would be about what we expect. There might be some events that haven't come through yet. Now, as you can see, we've got the name, we've got the timestamp. We also have this information that came along with it. Not every column that is returned with the events is automatically thrown up into the live viewer, but we can put it up there, and it's fairly simple. So we can say, hey, we want to show this column in the table. We want to bring in session ID. We want to bring in instance. And so we can see how often these fill in. Maybe we wanted to know what the host name is. Maybe we want to show the app name. And now we've got all that information that was running out there. Now we've only got one login that's being logged in. But if there's others, we would see all of this. Now we might want to do some filtering on this. So maybe we want to see only, let's say session ID 58, which at this point is only to show us our logouts, because on a login you don't actually know what session you have. And so now we have all of those. And we can do other things with this data. Let's just pull this down a little bit so we can see. Oh, let's actually, we can stop this. And stopping this from the live viewer doesn't stop the session itself. The session is still running. We can go over here and we can do a refresh. We can see that. The session is still running, still collecting, but we've stopped the live viewer from collecting information. And the reason why we did that is maybe we want to do some grouping on it. Where we bring in the name, we bring in the server principal, and we bring in the app name. So maybe we want to do some grouping on that. And then we can see that even though there's not much that's going on this machine, we can see, hey, there's 2,853 of these. Now, this can be useful if you need to do some quick analysis on some of the information that you're auditing. You wanted to go in and find out, how many times XYZ login is being used. And that's some of the things that you can do with login auditing. So going back, and remember, if you have questions as we're going through this, please throw them into the Q&A, and we'll start answering those, I believe, in about 10 minutes, which should give us about 10 minutes to do Q&A. But we want to now go on to building query audits. And this is the one that I've done quite a few times when I've been out at clients or when I just don't trust people. I'm a DBA, so I have a trust issue with people. And basically, I want to know what queries did the new DBA run? What's being run against XYZ database? Why is that every day in production, that certain developer, and only him, is causing severity 20 errors to occur on the system? To me, that's a problem. And I don't want to make a big fuss out of it. I want to figure out, what's going on first, see what's going on, and maybe find out that after I run an extended event session to capture all of that guy's queries, I find out that he's using maybe some code generation tools that are supposed to only be used in development, and he's using them on production in the peak hours of the day. Now, I'm not saying that that ever really happened, but I did use extended events to find out that somebody was doing that once. And so I don't believe in just giving trust. I believe that every user needs to earn trust. So you don't know why new DBAs left their last job. I'd like to say it's because they got so good at their job that there just wasn't a challenge for them anymore, and they had to come to the new company or the new client that I'm working with, and that's why they're there. But they're new. I don't know if that's the reason. I don't know if I can trust them yet, and that's one of the reasons to do some of these query audits. Find out what they're doing, so that when you trust them, you know that you should be trusting them. Because at the end of the day, if you give somebody trust that they shouldn't have had, it's going to be their fault, yes, but it's also going to be your fault because you gave them that trust. I learned that the hard way when I was first starting out in my career, where I told somebody to trust this guy and hire him to work within the group that I worked in, and when they fired him because he sucked at his job, I almost myself got fired because I told them that you could trust this guy. So you gotta watch that, and that's part of the reason why we do these security audits, is because who do we trust? So when we're looking at query auditing, as I mentioned earlier, we want to look at the starting events, or the start events. RPC modules, SP statements, SQL batch statements, SQL statement starting. We want to pull all that stuff in. The targets, we're going to do about the same targets as before because, well, if we're doing long-term tracking, we're going to throw it out to a file. Also, if we want to do just short-term tracking, we might want to throw it out to a file in case maybe we want to make sure that the data survives the restart. Remember, if you throw things into memory, you shut down your SQL server, that information is gone. So maybe you're doing short-term, but you throw it into a file because, well, you want to be able to look at it tomorrow and you want to survive a restart if that were to happen. And then the event stream if you want to dig into it more. So let's take a look at a demo doing just that kind of work. So let's just close this. Close out this window, close out this one window, open up the query audit. And if you are curious about the scripts that are on the login audit, me show you that there's not much there. It's just comments telling me exactly to do what I did within the demo I just last did. Now, the session I'm using for the query audit is one that I'm going to build within extended events through code. Now, there's quite a few events that are in here. You can have multiple events within an extended event session. In this one, what I'm doing is I'm creating an event session. We're going to call it Query Audit. And I do have one that's out here right now, so I'm just going to delete this one here, just so I don't, when I run this, have any issues. So we'll delete that one. We're going to do the modules start. I'll zoom in here. We're going to do RPC starting, so your store procedures. We're going to do SV statement starting, batch starting, and SQL statement starting. So every type of way that a SQL statement is going to be run on your server, we're going to be capturing that. And we do have some filters here, and I'll open up the GUI so we can take a look at those a little bit more. But what we're basically doing is ignoring anything for databases 1, 2, 3, and 4. So we just don't want to see what's happening in the system databases. We are using 2 targets here, and the targets that we are using is the event file and the ring buffer. So let's go through and we'll run through that, get that started. Well, we'll get that created, and then we'll get it started. As I mentioned, they don't tie together. So we've got that started, and we can look here in the sessions and we can see that it's there. Now, just because we created it with code doesn't mean that we can't go through and edit it from the GUI. And so it's going to load it up here. And we've got the name, and then we've got events. Once we have the events, we'll see all the events that we have loaded over on the side here. There we go, more like an arrow. We could add new events in here if we wanted to, but in this case we don't really want to. We want to actually look at those filters because I kind of highlighted over them, but I kind of spaced them off. So let's take a look at that and go into Configure. So when you go into Configure, you're going to get all of your events. And as you click on any one of them, you'll get a list of all your global fields or your actions. 2 terms, same exact thing. We could add in new items if we wanted to. We don't want to in this case. What we're really here to do is take a look at filters because we didn't look at filters too much in the last one. So we've got database ID, we've got system, is system, and is system is basically saying, is it something that's running in the background that's part of the SQL Server operating system? Typically, we don't want that, and so we've got that set to 0 for all of these. And then we've got everything ignoring anything that's a system database. And then we've got event fields. And these event fields are what we've added in here. And so it's all of the different components. And these are the fields that come with it. Some of the fields do have checkboxes that control whether or not extra data is included. Not every single column for an event is always included. There are some things that you may not want to see because of what's part of that payload. You know, it might add additional work just to include that. You can modify the data storage, and then here you can modify some advanced pieces. These ones you can only modify when this session is stopped. And the session's running right now, so we can't do too much about that. But let's watch the live data here so we can see what kind of information we can pull back. And you can see right now that I got session ID, username, and SQL text here at the top. That's because I had a session that was named the exact same thing that was previously running that had the same events, and so it pulled that information in. Management Studio does a good job of remembering things that you last did when it comes to that kind of stuff. So let's just run this for myself. We'll log into another window. That was definitely not new query. We'll log into another window here, and we're going to change it to SQL Auth. So we'll do that. And then go back here. We'll steal this query. We'll run that. And if we go into the live viewer, we're going to see that the number of queries we're running here, we got number of queries being run by PREDICATES. So we can see that kind of stuff going on. You can see the database that's being run against. We can see the username. We can see the SQL text. And maybe we want to filter by value. And actually, we want to not see anything from SQL prompt. And there we go. And so we can see the things that are out there. And if you notice, I did this filter without changing the extended event session. So you don't have to go back and always change the extended event sessions to change the things that you're looking at. And so here are those two queries that we ran for junior DBA. Well, maybe now when we're looking at this, maybe we only wanted to get things for the junior DBA. So let's go back through here. We're going to stop this session. This is going to error out, so we'll stop that. Let's go in here and modify the properties. Go into the events, and we're going to modify this so that the username is only junior DBA. And we'll do this for each one of them. All right, we've got junior DBA on each one of those. We'll run that. It's going to change it, get it going. We'll start it up again. Take a look at the live data. Let's go back to our original query. Remember here we've got myself logged in, and we'll run that. Let's go to that other file that we got where it's logged in as the junior DBA. We'll run that. We'll take a look here. And this may take up to 30 seconds to bring the data back. And the reason for that is extended events isn't an immediate system. It queues things up, and then when it gets the time and resources, it will process through the events. So we'll give that up to 30 seconds to go. While that's collecting, let's open up the event file. Now, one of the cool things about using event files is that if you open it up and you double-click on it, it's going to open up the live viewer and show you all of the information that was in the live viewer. So this is everything that's been collected in this. Easily accessible. You can start doing any of those analytics and filters. So if I want to filter by .NET SQL app, we can filter by that. So that filter's still there. You know, maybe we want to do, let's see here. Actually, let's remove the filter, and then we'll do some grouping by client app name. And so you can see that way that we can dig into it. We can find out where things are coming from and who's calling what and for what reasons. Let's take a look in here. And, well, it doesn't look like it's going to come through. Let me try running this. There we go. Not sure why it took so long to pull back the information, but there is just the junior DBA. If we go back to this query audit, let's just run this a couple more times. It's going to not show up in here. You'll have to take my trust. Hopefully, throughout the whole thing, I earned a little bit of your trust, so you can trust me that even if we waited here for another half an hour, it's not going to show up. So at this point, if you have any questions, please make sure you get them into the Q&A box, and Rachel will read them off to me. We've got about 5 more minutes that we can do questions for. I do want to mention one thing, is that if you want to learn more about extended events, and you want to do some hands-on, and you want to see people in person, we are having a performance tuning week-long class. It's a deep dive boot camp that's going to be run in Boston later this year. You can check that out on the Pragmatic Works website. It's going to be a fairly intense session. Bradley Ball and myself and Jorge are all working on it, and our goal is to make people's ears bleed. But we will provide some band-aids for that. So if you want more information, please go to the Extended Events session site, and feel free to reach out for me if you have any questions I'll do my best to reply to people as fast as I can when I get questions. So Rachel, do we have any questions in the queue?
We do, Jason. Let's go ahead and get started with those. The first one is Extended Events Audit more lightweight than SQL Audit? That was my understanding.
Extended Events and SQL Audit are based on the same technologies. SQL Audit uses Extended Events within the system to do all of that work. So, and they don't share a lot of events. The login and the logout event are basically the events that they share. So the impact for both is going to be about the same.
Okay. And the next question, can the SQL Audit return the IP address or name of the client machine that performed the query?
It cannot do the IP address, but it can give you the client machine, so the host name.
Okay. And can logon audit be used when database is a backend for an application to know who has logged into the application?
Yes. Yeah, you just use the login event, and you can use either SQL Audit or you can use just the underlying SQL extended events to pull that event out.
Okay. And how does extended events-based audit monitoring compare with data collector, MDW, approach in terms of resource usage and performance?
So that's a tricky one. Extended events is a very lightweight system. Typically on a per event basis, you're seeing about 2 microseconds of CPU utilization. So in that regards, it performs very well. As far as comparing to MDW, I don't have anything directly that states on that. If I were to have a guess, I would say that extended events would be a lighter weight solution, just because it's all baked in within the engine.
Okay. And the next question is, how extended events auditing affects production database server performance?
The answer is about the same what I just mentioned. It's that 2 microseconds per event. It's geared to be extremely lightweight. There are actually a couple blog posts out there. One's by Jonathan Cahias that actually looks at the observer weight for extended events for a number of different events that are out there. Go out and take a look for that, and if you just look for extended events observer impact, it'll probably come right up. But it's a very lightweight process in most cases. There's a couple events and couple actions that you can add on, like if you pull out the event that gives you every single execution plan and the execution plan itself after statements are completed. That might sound like it's going to be a fairly expensive event, and it would be. So there are some that are kind of expensive, but when you're talking about things like logins, when you're talking about statement completed, these are statement startings, these are fairly lightweight.
Okay.
More
and
like
Dave says, can we set up alerts or notifications based on something in the extended events?
So you can't set up alerts based on extended events for the most part. There is an API, there is the PowerShell integration, there is the event stream. So you could take those and create an event alerting system where you use a .NET app or PowerShell to pull against the event stream to see what's coming out and then build out your own alerts. Alternatively, I would actually, if you're looking at alerts based upon maybe somebody logging in too many times and their login being broken, not broken, but their password being wrong and then their login being locked. If you're trying to track that kind of stuff, or you want to see when somebody's logging in from XYZ server using a specific login, you would want to look at event notifications instead, because that uses service broker and that is specifically geared towards doing notifications based upon those kind of events.
Okay. And how does performance overhead for extended events compare to SQL Profiler?
That article I mentioned that John Caius put out there on his SQL Skills blog, that gives you some hard facts about it, but generally SQL Trace is much more impactful than extended events.
Okay, and it's just about 12 o'clock. We have enough time to maybe take one more question. And it says, let's say we create an audit and the person who created the audit itself is smart enough to start and stop the audit before he does something he is not supposed to. How do we capture that itself?
So if you're using SQL Audit and you're storing them to a location that most people, particularly this person, doesn't have access to, the start, the stop, and the change of the SQL Audit, those events will be in the SQL Audit logs. So you want to make sure that when you're doing SQL Audit that you're putting it to a location that SQL Server can read and write to, but typically people don't have access to. And that way you can have sysadmins that can be out there that can dig into things but can't get to those SQL Audit files. Now they may be able to go out there and delete the files. If you have those kind of concerns with DBAs that are out there, they may not need to be DBAs for you for very much longer. But there's lots of ways. There's not lots of ways. There are ways to get around some of the audit pieces that are out there, and you're going to have to manage that through permissions.
Okay. Do you have time for one more?
I do.
Okay. It says, compare the performance impact between extended events and a server-side trace.
That would actually end up being the same as Profiler. Well, using Profiler would be a little bit more because you're pulling the information across the network, but SQL trace versus extended events almost always wins out, and where it doesn't win out, it's on par. The extended events that were rewritten for extended events, because there's two ways in which extended events have been implemented. One is that it was completely rewritten, and it's down in the OS or the SQL Server platform, and it's down at the event level. The other ones are, the other types of extended events that are out there are ones that are actually just the SQL trace that's been translated into extended events. And so it's either on par or better.
Okay, and there's one last question, and we can wrap up. It says, are extended events push-based rather than polling-based, for example polling DMVs?
So the extended events, the best way to put it is, so when the event happens, the extended events queues up that event into an extended event queue, and then within 1 to 30 seconds, SQL Server will go back in and access that queue and then process that information depending upon how busy it is. And then it pushes that information into the target. So if you want to go and get the information out of the targets, which are actually available through DMVs, that is going to be poll-based, but the information going into that data collection is push-based. Hopefully that answered the question how they're asked.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. That does wrap us up. We're a little bit over 12, and I apologize. Just as a reminder that are still on, our sessions are recorded and will be made available by the end of the week. And Jason, also, if you want to visit his blog spot or email him with any additional questions that you may have. And thank you so much, and hope to see everybody back on Thursday for more free training on the T's. Thank you again, Jason.
Thanks.